Vincent St. Pierre, welcome to Interview with a Gamer. I'm excited to chat with you.
Hey, thank you for having me on, Ben.
It's a pleasure. I'm excited to get into this conversation. I'm going to give you the questionnaire that I've been working for. Are you ready?
You know what? One of my favorite things is talking about myself. So, as you well, so let's jump right in.
Okay. All right. First question. When did you first start playing games of any kind? And then when did you first start playing video games?
So the first games I played were video games. So I didn't really have a board game phase or a chess phase or whatever, what have you. It was straight to video games for me. And some of my earliest memories are actually hopping on to a Windows 98 PC and just going ham, playing all the various bits of Solitaire, in other words, and then eventually going really in deep to playing some Starcraft. So it was a whole thing. It kind of occupied a lot of my life as a child and as a young teen, and a little bit now.
Was Solitaire your first game that you remember?
Well, it's clicking on Solitaire, and then I couldn't figure it out, so I went like, "Oh, this is lame," and then I jumped over to Windows Pinball.
I've heard that people who play solitaire are obsessed with death because fate has been decided when you first start the game. Like it's determined whether or not you're going to win at the beginning. You might get unlucky or you might not see things and lose in a winning hand, but if it's a losing hand, there is nothing you can do. You are going to lose.
So it might be a good thing I didn't understand the game. I still don't understand Solitaire, so it's like okay,
You saved yourself from a lot of misery.
a life of deterministic philosophy.
Okay, take us, Vincent, from those early games on Windows 98, which I can totally relate to, and I can relate to StarCraft and Solitaire. Windows Pinball, I don't, I probably did play, but not very much. Warcraft, like the first Warcraft and Warcraft 2, like those are some early games for me, and it was all PC stuff. It was actually Windows 95 was the computer I first started playing on, and I remember playing Hangman on an Apple in like 1992 or something. But anyways, take us from that to today. Like chart your evolution as a gamer from those early games to whatever you're playing these days.
So I went from Pinball over to StarCraft to Warcraft 2, then onwards and upwards on from that. The first PC I ever built was a PC that I built to play uh, Knights of the Old Republic. So that would have been in junior high school then, and I was playing that for hours upon hours on end, and just getting into Star Wars and the whole sort of element to the genre of role playing games and a little bit of an adapted D&D. I then went through a pretty substantive Shadowbane phase, which was a player versus player massive multiplayer online RPG, where that basically took me from junior high all the way to high school. Uh, and then I got fairly deep in various RPGs. The work of one when Shadowbane shut down all of its servers, which is that's part of it. I then pivoted off to a lot of strategy games. So the Total War series, between Rome Total War to Shogun, not the first one but the second one, the various Warhammer Total War games. I have about 2,500 hours currently built up on Total War Warhammer 2, and I got about 5 hours currently in Warhammer 3. So that is, I have some video gaming to catch up on, but it was a shift from that single player to massive multiplayer online RPGs back to engaging with the sort of one on one and then into grand strategy. And that's where I currently find myself, mucking around a little bit, one off for, a little bit of Starcraft 2 once in a while. I just, experimented a little bit by playing the most recently remastered Halo 1 and the prologue prequel one of that as well. And then I've also gone quite heavily with that 2,000 plus hours, at least, into Total War Warhammer 2.
Vincent, that's an achievement, I've got to say. Did I hear you mention earlier D&D in some games? Do you play Dungeons and Dragons?
I have a weekly D&D group that I participate with. So
Is it live or in person, or is it online?
it's over Discord because some of the players are across the country. So, being able to get everyone in one time zone is a little too difficult. So we got a group of us, and it's a group of folks from a previous career in various political activities in Ottawa. So it's a group of folks that I worked with there, and we've reconnected over the pandemic. And one part of it was, they have a regular D&D group, so I included myself in this mischief. And because there's a pandemic, because of everything being pulled apart and spread away, we were able to actually, there's an opportunity for, hey, this guy from out of town was able to participate as well. So a little bit of a boon from the pandemic.
That's great. I've got a group as well, and it's across the country. There are some players in Calgary, some players in Ottawa, and it's a wonderful experience with a group of friends. And I ask people who are gamers who play D&D, whether online or in person, if it's the same, if you get the same fix out of it, if you're getting the same enjoyment out of it as you get from video games. So, do you, or is it something totally different? So for me, when I'm playing a game, usually single player, it's just my style. I get a very different thing back for myself than I get from sitting with a group of people playing a game. It's more like improv, and the other is more like solitary, almost work to get a dopamine hit. For you, are they more? Is there more overlap, or are they distinct entities in your life?
So, my sort of gamer journey shared that I was a bit of a war gamer, so that I do get that itch scratched with the weekly D&D game. Being able to go, okay, these are limited resources. This is our action economy. How do I maximize the damage that this team can do? And as I say that, I play a druid for this game, so it's less as much as my own damage being dealt, and more so much of, so it scratches that specific sort of wargaming-esque itch, but there's also that joint storytelling element, which being able to create a journey from a group of characters, playing with the dungeon master and just seeing where the story's going, taking it as like an exploration of a world. That's what I also enjoy. So it scratches those two very dissimilar, almost contradictory itches, and that exploration element, I'm not sure the modern game fits that well.
That makes sense. I hear you. I think that at times there is some overlap for me, especially if I'm playing online. Then it's the interface with the computer, and yeah. Vincent, I wanted to ask. This is a question to which the answer may be different tomorrow, might have been different yesterday, might be different 5 minutes from now. But about your favorite or most powerful games for you that you've ever played. Knowing that this could be different if you think about it a little bit more. But right now, what's your favorite game that you would replay over and over and over again? And if you have one, what's a game that was your favorite one-time experience that could not be repeated?
So I would say favorite game that I could repeat over and over and over again would 100% be Knights of the Old Republic, the first one. And I know that because I, played it over and over and over again. And the next game of playing through it once and not being able to play through it again, I would say that game would likely be the main campaign for Starcraft 2. Loved it. Enjoyed all, both DLCs for it, going through it, the management of resources and whatnot, the sort of outside of the real-time strategy map and the sort of planning resources as you go from map to map. Quite enjoyed it. But you play through it once, you have the journey, and then it's less interesting after that because you've had the experience, you've had the exposure, you've had the initial dopamine hit. And if you know the story well enough, it's the gameplay slowly becomes uninteresting. So
Yeah, I think that's an achievement of Starcraft and Warcraft and games like that where the replayable part is these procedurally generated maps or well, I guess not procedurally generated in Starcraft, but a map with an opponent where anything could change, whether the opponent changes or it's a computer opponent, but just the way that the dice roll in the game, things change. But there's also this non-repeatable campaign experience where a really powerful story is being created. And I think a lot of games try to achieve both, but usually fall into one or the other. And I think StarCraft is a game that is an example of a game where they really nailed both. Vincent, how often do you play games on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in your life right now? Like, how much can you fit it in, and how many hours per day, per week, so on? Yeah.
so I have more recently it's been shifted from a daily habit to more of a weekly habit. So before it was an occasion where, I'd get home from work, I'd play for 3 or 4 hours, and then I'd turn off, then turn in for the night. Uh, Now, I fit it in when I can, mostly on the weekend. Between, running a consultancy and, various contract work, it doesn't leave too much time for play. So it's gone down from about 4 hours a day to somewhere close to maybe 1 or 2 hours a week.
Okay. Uh, are games addictive for you? Have they ever been? Are they currently? Do some games have that quality and others don't? Are games addictive?
Oh heavens! They 100% addictive. 100%. There is no question in my mind that I had a gaming addiction in my youth. For between junior high and high school, I mentioned that Shadowbane massive multiplayer online RPG. It was something that may have occupied more than 30 to 40 hours of my life. Some folks had a World of Warcraft addiction. Mine was built surrounding this other MMORPG. So I've since been able to switch that out, and I moved my preoccupation into different areas, throughout, university and otherwise.
Okay. And this is a question that I've had to look at the wording a little bit, but should you play games more or less than you currently do?
I would say more. I have some good memories playing games. You can build relationships with other folks through gaming. I would argue that it's something that not only can build a skill set, an understanding of the world, but also sharing in journeys with others. So to build community online and off, I would argue that gaming can be a very powerful force in the world. So I'd argue more gaming for Vincent would be good.
Okay, that's a good answer. Um, Before I get to the next question, you've mentioned the Total War series. This is a series I've never had a chance to play, but I think would be up my alley. I like strategy games. I like war games. I've just been interested in that since I was a kid. But they seem that, and I don't know this, it's just from the gameplay that I've watched, that they're intricately detailed, that there's just a lot going on in the real-time strategy sense on the map, and it just would be overwhelming to click on different things. And there's a lot of clicking which would maybe interfere with thinking. I don't know if I'm wrong about that, but can you explain to me what is the series doing and what are you doing as a player when you're in a typical Total War game?
So you're talking to a fellow who, between Total War 1, 2, 3, Rome Total War 1 and 2, and also Shogun 2, and one or two other iterations of the series, has probably pulled in probably north of 10,000 hours. Um, I would highlight that there are some introductory sections that would be very helpful. Rome 2 might be the best introduction that I've found. It splits the game into two halves. One is the overworld map where you're sort of negotiating the turn-based elements of, you know, building troop numbers, changing cities, taking cities, losing cities, and the basic troop movement. And then there's the other half of the game, which is the in-depth control of the various troops, heroes in certain games and certain series, and the actual movement of the various forms of, be it artillery, archers, whatever have you, range or melee. Once you split it off into those two halves, and you sort of like dip your toe into a little bit and just get a little familiar with it with the introductory packages, it's a wonderful way to engage, and there's multiple layers. It's a bit like an iceberg. At the very top, okay, you have the basic clicking, but the moment that you get a deeper understanding of what counters what and the more fluidity of combat that can take place, it's a pretty enjoyable experience, and I found it quite wonderful. And leading me to many a night playing until 3 a.m., just going like, one more turn, one extra turn, let's go. I'm almost at my goal X. So I would recommend it, and it does get a little complicated, but the complications come in later as you sort of dive under the water beneath the iceberg, as it were.
I understand that they're these really powerful, wonderful games, and they seem like it. And that's a great description that you've just given of why you play them and what brings you in. And it's a combination of the just one more turn, but also the breadth and depth of the environment in which you are playing. Like, I understand that there's a lot of research that's been put into these games. Do you think that they're also instructive about the period, or that they can teach us something? So I had a recent conversation as part of this series with Montana Hunter, who plays similar kinds of games, and it actually is essentially a war historian and polemologist, a study of war. He's a student of war, and it actually does this as a career, and talked about games that are the grand strategy type, whether it's paradox games like Europa Universalis or perhaps the Total War series, which help you better understand the past. We may learn things by playing these simulations that no amount of archaeological research would give us. They give us an understanding of what it felt like to be in the period, or what it felt like to make military decisions in a certain context. Do you find that, first of all, that the Total War games do that successfully? And second of all, is that something that you're looking for in a game, or is it more an escape for you?
So I have three answers to that, Ben. One, some of these games are better at history than others. For example, Rome Total War 1 had various troops during 300 BC that would make more sense in the 2000 BC. So they had various elements and characteristics of armies that were pre-Hellenistic, whereas, by that point in time, Alexander had gone through Egypt and shifted it to a more Greek style of combat for the various forces in that theater. So, some historiography has left much to be desired. But on the greater point of, does it shape a person? Does it, aid in, a career path or otherwise? I actually, when I catastrophically failed out of engineering as a youth, did not make it past the first semester, it was actually within these video games that I took great comfort, and particularly with the Total War series. And it actually transformed my education path out of engineering and into military history. So I ended up on a completely different path, I would argue, because some of these games and their influence on me. And it led to a deep love of history. It was an introduction, and it led to me being able to go, wait a second, this doesn't quite make sense. And it also led to a wonderful way of, going and having an exploration of, how has this world of ours been created? how it's been engaged with what took place, thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, but also what could take place tomorrow and the day after. It also was a bit of a driving force, I would argue, in my career path post, education, post university from about 2013 onwards, where, you know, I engaged in similar behaviors where I was able to, support folks and get various elements pushed forward in my local community on the point of either politics, community building, and being able to press that, various high level strategic elements into changing my neighborhood for the better. So I'd say that gaming introduction, that military element, was fundamentally transformative for me, and it was a great introduction and turned to a lifelong passion of reading about history.
That's fascinating. For me, I read about history probably before playing any kind of historical game. But what happened was is I loved reading about this stuff and then realized, oh, I can actually act it out too. And it became this kind of synthesis between reading and doing that I quite liked. Last question of this part. Do you ever live stream playing for others? And do you ever watch others play any game on Twitch or whatever service?
From time to time, I've watched some challenge runs off of YouTube. So one of the games that I took quite a fondness to in my youth was Pokemon, and watching Nuzlocke attempts, or where they add extra challenges or randomized critters in their Pokemon playthroughs. I find, I've enjoyed that, but it's always a certain element with an additional edge or a particular challenge. How do I break this group? Like, break the game, as it were. So there's the various groups of YouTubers that I follow along with that I quite enjoy seeing how they, shift the gaming experience. For on the Total War series, there's this couple folks online, primarily gentlemen, like Legend of Total War, who I watch from time to time. A little less now because I don't have as much time now. But, seeing his challenge runs, I derive great amounts of, joy. And, I'm able to watch along and see how they implement strategies in a different place, how they break the game, and how they shift it, and being able to, take, different tacks that I could implement on my own playthroughs. As for streaming myself, I've thought about it. I have a YouTube channel. I'll eventually turn it on. But I've always had the temptation. I've been learning how OBS works, so that's why I've had it installed already on my system for our chat today. So I'm thinking about it, and also I got this heavy duty mic. I got to use it at one point for something other than Zoom calls.
Well, Vincent, you've got a few weeks now, so if you get this up and running before this video comes out, then we can promote wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and people can come and watch it. The 7 people who are watching this video can come watch your videos. But that would be cool. I'd love to watch some of the stuff that you play and your unique way of thinking applied to games. Vincent, the next part is just a series of yes or no questions. You can elaborate if you want, or you don't have to. So the first one is, has a game ever made you laugh?
Yes.
Like multiple times, or is it just is it rare that this happens?
So sometimes it's, oh my goodness, I made a terrible mistake, and I laugh out of, just the enjoyment of the surprise of a loss. But other times it's, I think back to, Warcraft 2, as folks would click on, peons, and they'd have a specific voice recording that would play each time. And I always quite enjoyed, clicking on the orc critter, the peon, and having him say, "Hey, stop poking me." And that I would spend probably more time than I should have, hours on end, just clicking on them, just going like, "Okay, let's play all the sounds."
I've actually heard other people talk about that same thing. I think Lamoros, who I talk to on this channel once in a while, has mentioned that clicking on peons in Warcraft, and I think I have the same pleasure from that, like interacting with the world and making it silly, and Yeah, but without taking me fully out of it. That was a fun part. Um, has a game ever made you cry?
Has a game ever made me cry? I would say no.
Okay. Has a game ever made you quit in frustration?
Yes.
Like what? Total War or Warcraft, or what's made you quit in frustration?
Oh, well, like, hour 7 of playing through Starcraft 2, and like you're in a platinum match and things go horribly sideways and you get dropped down a tier. That's happened. And then I walk away from the computer.
Of course. Has a game ever made you decide to play less perfectly?
Oh, suboptimal runs? Absolutely. Like sometimes you want to play a challenge, like for example the Total War series. Shifting away from what would be recommended as a stereotypical, you know, uh, uh, army composition, to play suboptimally, or to go lore heavy, even to go in the opposite direction of a suboptimal play, and go well in deep. How would an army be traditionally carried out? For the Rome Total War series, actually going through the pre-Marian reforms of, and then having those like three different lengths of armies, and those in depth, and having the triarii at the back, and going that full tilt rather than various long lined elements that most folks typically seem to play. So being able to go lore heavy and try to go in depth and like recreate battles, as it were, suboptimal play, but equally fun.
Well, I would say for someone who has 2,500 hours in a particular game, you'd almost have to go suboptimal at some point once you've achieved a certain level of mastery in order to keep it fun, in order to keep it challenging, whether it's tying one hand behind your back or maybe almost role playing is what it sounds like, playing as if you were in a different position and seeing how that would unfold. An interesting example of that, this is something that, again, Montana and Hunter and I talked about, is Crusader Kings 3, a game that is both grand strategy, historical, about a definite time period and maybe painting the map a certain color, but you're playing as a character in that world. And to what extent do you lean into that character, even if it means failure in other ways? But the opposite is also true. To what extent do you dispose of your characters and make them disposable in order to paint the map a certain color? The next question is, has a game ever made you decide to change your life?
I've already answered this in a way. Yes. My pursuit of a history degree came out of my love of these different grand strategy games.
Yeah, that's perfect. And you don't have to elaborate. You already did, but that's a really great example of that, because I think some people got into gaming either parallel to their career or after their career started or their education, and keep them a little bit apart. But I mean, there's many examples where games can influence someone, whether they know it or not. I think some people, the question may be a little bit of a misnomer, because maybe it should be, has a game ever made you change your life, whether you decided it or not, whether you even knew it at the time or not? Okay, next section is on preferences. So this is either or questions. Not, you can explain it. Maybe we will, some of them, but they don't have to be explained. So the first one is, do you prefer to play games that ask you to imagine something, or do you prefer ones that give you everything up front?
Imagine something.
In the Total War series, are you imagining? Is it kind of an inspiration to go somewhere else in your mind a little bit?
I would say so. Figuring out what my opponent will do, what I should do in reaction to it. It's a full escalation of, what would I do in this situation? How would I adjust and recalibrate? It's a full on little bit of mental gymnastics, which is it's fun.
Okay. Do you usually play games to wind up? So things with that have action, explosions, timers, quick motions, or ones that wind you down, requiring patience and planning, that have maybe no time limit, that are maybe, again, either painting the map slowly or rushing to paint it quickly? Wind up or wind down?
You know what? I lean towards the wind up, but interval winding up and winding down that's pretty fun too, but I lean towards the winding up.
Okay, that makes sense. I think a lot of gamers would probably answer in a similar way that you could do both, but it's not like I sit down in one session to wind up and I sit down in another one to wind down, that they actually can go together. Like I'm in 1 hour I'm winding down, but then I get back up again. Almost like the chart of a plot of a movie going up and down.
Well, it's the narrative, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think is intriguing for a player or an audience member. Turn-based or real-time?
Oh, you're talking to lean towards the real time, but with the Total War series, you get both. But real time.
In the Total War series, is it real-time when you're in combat and then turn-based when you're looking at the greater map? Is that more how it works?
Exactly.
Console, PC, or phone, tablet?
PC 100%.
Have you ever played on a console at all, or have you been PC 100% since the beginning?
I have been largely PC since the beginning. I've had consoles previously. I've had the Stream, the previous iteration of the Stream Deck, the various elements of Xbox, PlayStation 2. But the thing is, I could play a large majority of those games on my PC anyway. So I've found the customization that can take place on a PC and on the tools, as it were. I can get up to more mischief and play more games on PC.
Okay. Single player or multiplayer?
Single player.
Can you, the kind of games that you play, obviously like Starcraft I know is multiplayer. Is Total War multiplayer possibly?
It can be. You can, yes.
And have you ever played multiplayer, or do you shy away from that mostly?
I shy away from it. I always shied away from multiplayer, even on Starcraft 2, even. Because, I don't want to hurt another person. That's, I'm a bit of a softie that way. But I love the cooperative play elements of Starcraft 2. The changing series and the various competitive play that you do with team members. In playing against the AI with a human player. That's fun.
I can relate. I'm a single player gamer as well, but I think for me, my fear of multiplayer is more that I'm going to get my ass kicked and less that I'm going to kick someone else's ass. Vincent, next question. Open world or on the rails?
On the rails.
AAA or indie?
Indie.
Okay. And is a game for you most of the time, and I know it can be both, but typically art or entertainment?
Entertainment.
Okay. The next part is everything is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being low, 10 being high, because 1 is low and 10 is high. So to you, how important in a game are aesthetics between 1 and 10?
6.
Story?
8.
Okay. If you have one, your player character?
5.
And if there are other characters, how important are the other characters?
I'd go with 5 as well.
Okay. The mechanics of the game, in other words, the rules that you're following, the things that you have to abide by, not so much the coding of the game, but the mechanics of play.
8.
Novelty?
4.
Okay. Nostalgia?
1.
Okay. And finally, strategy. So anything that's making you try to think ahead, think several moves ahead, go away and try to plan your next move, strategy.
9.
9. Okay. Great. Okay. Interesting. What I find interesting about that section is between 1 and 10 is you would think that the answers might be all the same from different people, but you get very different answers from different people. Some people really value story and novelty. Again, Lamoros, I think novelty is very high for her because she wants to get a game that excites her curiosity, that she has never experienced before. And some gamers want nostalgia, something that takes them back. Like for me, any game that resembles Civilization or Warcraft or Starcraft or SimCity is going to tickle something for me. It's going to take me back to when I was a teenager and all the hours that I sunk in at that time. Anyways, this final question, final part. Are there, you mentioned a little bit earlier about friendships, relationships that have been built through playing games. Is that still something that's important to you in your life today, the relationships that you form with others through games? And how solid and important are those relationships compared to other kinds?
Well, so one of those elements of um, case in point why my experience with the MMORPG in my youth was so influential on me was because I formed these bonds with, a whole chunk of gamers across the planet. There's various guilds that were I was a part of. One being quite formative in how I, viewed the world and engaged with others, and it was the Defenders of Valeria. It's this one guild that I participated with for more than 2 years across, various servers being turned on and off with the game and the various folks there, and it had like looking back and reflecting on it. They were all in their early 30s. They've been playing together for years, and I was this, little teenager just jumping into their friend circle, and I got to learn so much from them. Not only, speaking with others, but also engaging with them, being on TeamSpeak forever and a day ago. It was one entire, journey with that, and even now today, that weekly D&D group, that playing of games, that sharing of story, and I don't think I'd be in the same spot today and having had the journey I've been on through my 32 years of life without games and without, these different stories that we've shared together and that we tell together.
That's a great answer. Vincent, is there a game that's on your digital shelf or real shelf that you're just dying to play and just waiting for the right time or to have enough time?
So I'm 5 hours in on Total Warhammer 3. And as a person with like 10,000 plus hours in the rest of the series, I just need to find the time. And I like to do a little bit of a binge gaming with these elements because, once you get settled in, you can just keep on going.
Total Warhammer 3, in the 5 hours that you've played, is it an improvement on Total Warhammer 2? Is it offering some new things? Is it the game that you wished it would be in just the little time you've had?
Uh, in the little time that I've had, the improvement on graphics is appreciated. The shift on CPU heaviness is the previous version wasn't quite optimized for PC for various elements, so the changes that they've done on the back end is quite appreciated. So I've noticed it runs better, runs quicker, turns are shorter. So there's various other quality of life improvements that I've noticed, and I like the different themes of the different critters, so the different factions, as it were. So those elements I've quite enjoyed so far, and they've been a highlight.
Okay, right on. Last question. Is there something in this conversation we've just had that we talked about that you wished we would talk about more, or was there something that we didn't talk about that you wish we had?
Well, there's one question that you asked about the impact of history of games and of learning from others. There's this wonderful book that I read in junior high. I believe it was by Plutarch, and it was The Lives of Romans. And this author would go through the various lives of various historical figures and go, this is why he or she was a great Roman. This is how they went from one thing to another, and this is how they built their credibility with the community, or this is how they've, shared or shaped their city for the better. And it was one of those moments where, just jumping off of the idea that you shared earlier of not only could someone learn from history, but they could participate in it as well and be able to shift and shape their neighborhood for the better. It's one of those, I thought back to that book, and I have a copy of it behind me somewhere, and I might reread it later, purely because of the spark from this conversation.
Cool. Well, that's a positive thought, and to think about how games can align with making the world a better place. I think they can. I think they should. And I think often they do. Vincent, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your story and who you are as a gamer, because I think we can learn a lot from you and from this conversation.
Absolutely. I look forward towards, watching it on repeat like 3 or 4 times to see all the. I'll count all the times I say and
Well, I'll count all the times that I cough, but let us know if you start streaming, because I think that would be really fun, and I hope you do.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay, thanks, Vince.